Have you heard of the Georgia Water Wars? Today, we're going to talk about the water wars, and it might sound a little crazy and dramatic, and some people say it's just politics. Others say it's a real crisis that's waiting to happen. If you're thinking about moving to Georgia, this is definitely something you're going to want to know about. Hi, I'm Allison. My partner Jennifer and I help people buy and sell and relocate here in Georgia. I relocated myself from the Northeast about 10 years ago, and Jen is a lifelong resident. We know making the move isn't easy. We've helped hundreds of clients do the same. We'd love to help you take those first steps, so call or text us. The number is below on the screen. Or if you're really ready to get started, go ahead and set up an appointment. The link for our calendar is right there in the comments. So today we're talking about something, again, it sounds a little crazy, but it has really real roots. The so-called water wars. So what does it mean? Why should you care? And how will it affect your life here? This is a very long history, but we're going to talk about the short version of Georgia's famous water wars. So let's go back to the 1930s when the Army Corps of Engineers dreamed up this plan for a hydroelectric project across the South. They decided to build the Buford Dam on the Chattahoochee River, which is here in Georgia. And this created Lake Lanier. At first, it wasn't about Atlanta. In fact, the city did not pay a dime for this project. And no one imagined it would ever need the lake as a water source. So fast forward a few decades, and Atlanta exploded in population, turning Lake Lanier from a weekend getaway into a lifeline for millions. And that's when the neighbors started to get a little nervous. And by neighbors, I mean Alabama and Florida. They rely on the same water for farming, fishing, and various industry. So by 1989, the Army Corps even suggested diverting the water from the power generation to Atlanta's growing thirst. And that is what lit the fuse for what we now call the water wars. From there, it was a decades-long legal showdown. In 1990, Alabama sued Georgia and the Corps, and then Florida joined shortly after. In 1997, the three states tried water-sharing compacts, but unfortunately those fell apart, and courts went back and forth about whether or not Lake Lanier could be used for drinking water. In 2011, a major court sided with Georgia, allowing Lake Lanier to supply Metro Atlanta. So then, Florida fought back. From 2013 all the way up to 2021, Florida took the fight to the Supreme Court, and they lost. Even as late as 2017, Alabama and environmental groups tried again, and the case was dismissed in 2021. So yes, 3 states, 3 decades of lawsuits, and a whole lot of lawyers, but Georgia still holds the hose. All right, so Georgia's reasoning is that Metro Atlanta alone needs about 705 million gallons of water per day to serve over 5.5 million people. That water comes from the North Georgia rivers, lakes like Altoona, Etowah. They help grow lawns, golf courses, feed swimming pools, and really just keep the demand that keeps climbing every year. Georgia says it isn't about greed, guys. It's about survival. Task force and governors over the years have tried balancing the growth with sustainability, and they're planning for decades ahead. But Alabama has been calling from downstream, and because Alabama relies on the same rivers for farming and industry and hydropower and recreation, they worry that Atlanta's consumption drops water levels too far, threatening lakes like West Point and Etowah, as well as the river ecosystems. Early on, Alabama was not fully equipped to fight legally, unfortunately, but they since have built up their water management systems, though disputes still flare up during droughts. So at the river's end, Florida depends on fresh water reaching the Apalachicola Bay, which supports the seafood industries and is worth millions of dollars and thousands of jobs. These lower flows threaten the seafood industry, like oysters, shrimp, and really the whole coastal economy. For Florida, this isn't about taps and homes. It's really about keeping an ecosystem and a huge livelihood together. So this brings us to the environmental implications. So we have fish, mussels, and other critters that live in these river basins. Endangered species like sturgeon need a steady flow of water to survive, and major rules require impact studies, but Lake Lanier's water allocation really hasn't had a full one. And that means despite all the lawsuits and the plans, the ecological consequences is still a huge unknown. So while the humans are out here fighting over the water, the rivers, lakes, and bays, they're really holding their breath. And the balance of life downstream depends on how well the states are going to share what's left. So what else is at stake, and why all the drama over a few rivers and a lake? Well, we've already talked about some of the issues, and really it's not just about watering your tap. There's a lot on the line. So we have 5 million residents that rely on the Chattahoochee River Basin, from small towns like Helen, Georgia, all the way up to Gordon, Alabama. That's homeowners, business businesses and entire communities depending on a steady water supply. About 800,000 acres of irrigated agriculture in Georgia's part of the Chattahoochee and Flint basins really just rely on this water, and it's contributing a huge chunk of the state's $13 billion farm economy. And farmers really don't need any more trouble right now. Going back to seafood and specialty products, Florida's Apalachicola Bay has oysters and the historic Tupelo honey, and the industry really depends on the rivers flowing downstream. So too little water and these industries are at risk. Then we have recreation and tourism. So lakes, rivers, and courses aren't just pretty views, they bring in millions of dollars. Think about Lake Lanier and the boating, the Chattahoochee National Recreation Center, and Columbus's Whitewater Course, and of course sport fishing across the region. And then we have energy and industry. Water is critical for hydropower, electricity, and industrial production. Without it, factories like energy generation are really going to take a hit. So basically, this isn't just about Atlanta's water tap or Florida's oysters. It's about millions of people, billions in economic activity, and an entire ecosystem. So you can see there really is a lot on the line. And a lot of it is under pressure from the continuous population growth, climate change, and extreme weather. So the big question you might be wondering, will Georgia run out of water? Let's talk about some of the big projects and plans that Georgia has put into place. So could Georgia actually run out of water if usage continues to grow? So not in the immediate future, so calm down. But there are stress points, especially in fast-growing regions like Metro Atlanta and coastal areas. For example, data centers in Metro Atlanta are massive water consumers. One facility alone uses millions of gallons of water a day for cooling. And then we have industrial growth like the Hyundai EV plant in Bullock County, which also uses millions of gallons a day. And finally, our aging infrastructure in Atlanta unfortunately can lead to leaks and inefficiency and overall just wasting water. Okay, next thing you might be thinking about is how might this affect your life if you live or move to Georgia today? So with all the history and the lawsuits and environmental concerns, what does it actually mean for you now? I think the biggest thing is the water restrictions. Some areas, especially during droughts, may have watering restrictions, limits on sprinklers, pools, or car washing. Cities like Atlanta, parts of Cobb and Gwinnett counties, and even smaller towns up north occasionally put these rules into place to protect supply. There also might be some rising costs. Water bills could gradually rise over time, to keep up with managing and treating the water, investing in reservoirs, and planning for future shortages. This just frankly is not cheap. So homeowners and businesses may see modest increases over time. And this will have effects on the real estate industry. Areas with secure and reliable access to water will be more attractive to buyers, while places with reoccurring restrictions or a limited supply, could see a slower growth and maybe even have values go down a bit. It's becoming part of migration patterns in Georgia. People and developers are paying attention to which areas can handle growth sustainability. And then we have the population and growth pressure. Metro Atlanta continues to grow fast, meeting more demand on lakes, rivers, and reservoirs. This could lead to more regional planning, conservation efforts, and water-efficient landscaping becoming part of everyday life. And finally, the effects it will have on the business and industry. So again, data centers, manufacturers, and other heavy water industries are watching supply very, very carefully. For example, areas like Fulton County, Gwinnett, and Forsyth County have seen clusters of data centers because water access is critical for cooling and operations. If supply were to get tight, it could affect expansion or operations. And I think the lifestyle considerations to keep in mind are that some neighborhoods and cities are going to be more sensitive to water restrictions than others. For example, golf courses, which we have plenty of, lakeside communities, and agricultural areas are going to be affected. So residents may have to adapt their lifestyle and maybe just take on a minor convenience like, restricted watering schedule. So in short, living in Georgia today means being aware of the water supply, conservation, and local regulations. It is definitely not an emergency yet. Taps will still run, and the state manages resources well. But it's something everyone from homeowners to businesses are keeping an eye on for the future. So where are the best areas in Georgia with minimal water restrictions? If you're considering moving to Georgia and you want to avoid the most water-stressed regions, here are some areas where water restrictions are less stringent and water resources are more abundant. All right, so North Georgia, Columbus Columbia County near Augusta, Oconee County, which has non-drought schedules, Central Georgia, and Forsyth County, which is a really great balance between suburban living and access to water resources. And then rural Georgia, areas with lower population density, abundant rivers and lakes, and fewer industrial demands. These regions currently offer more stable water conditions for residents and may provide peace of mind regarding water availability. So this is not just a Georgia thing, you guys. Water disputes happen all over the country. Think about California versus Arizona over the Colorado River, or the western states battling over groundwater. Anytime we have population growth, agriculture, industry, and ecosystems, they all need the same water, and conflicts are gonna pop up. So you might be wondering if the water wars are ever gonna get fully resolved. And if history tells us anything, honestly, it's pretty complicated. The legal battles have been going on for decades, and while courts have clarified some rules, the core tension between growing metro Atlanta, downstream needs, and environmental protection is really just not gonna go away anytime soon. However, Georgia has ongoing monitoring, conservation, and smart planning, which is really key. But full resolution is probably more of a long-term project. So should you think twice about moving to Georgia? No, not really. Atlanta and surrounding areas currently have a secure water supply, and most communities really do manage resources responsibly. That said, it's smart for homebuyers to check out local water restrictions, conservation plans, and growth trends before choosing a neighborhood. The bottom line is the water wars make for an interesting story and a few precautions for residents, but they aren't really a deal breaker for anyone living or thinking about investing in Georgia today. It's more about just being informed and aware of how water affects the region's growth, lifestyle, and long-term planning. So if you're thinking about making a move to Georgia, reach out by calling or texting the number on the screen. Jen and I would love to help you learn more about Georgia and Metro Atlanta to see if it's the right fit for you. Don't forget to like this video. It helps out a lot, and we'll see you next week.